Africa, the Nigerians have a category of art called jejura, which is a sitting of art between absolute realism and absolute abstraction. I think this is where the kind of work I do might fit into. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is get a balance. In some ways, trying to balance out the facility that I have. I have a lot of facility for drawing with the volume that's needed to balance a lot of facility. Volume might mean heart, head and heart. Well, the first time I remember getting any recognition as an artist was in kindergarten. I remember the teacher taking me by the hand after looking at a drawing of mine, taking me upstairs to show to the other teachers. Well, I don't even think I ever saw any black artists until I got much older. It wasn't until I went to the PAL and met Mr. Thibodeau, who was an artist and who was also black, that I could identify with somebody who was living in my world or working in my world.
Yeah, he would take soap bars, little pieces of soap, bars of soap, and carve out different things. And then later on, when he'd get finished with the carvings, I'd tell him, all right, so you put that in and you wash your clothes with it. But he said I could use it better if I was going to carve with it. I said, yeah, but you still can use the smaller pieces to wash your clothes. But he was always those and puppets. He liked to carve puppets and make his own puppets and clothe them and dress them up and work them with his hands and things. But it was always something he had to be doing with his hands.
I was working in the service, and that is kind of a restricted kind of way because it's like a 9-to-5 job, but in a sense, I was restricted to white subject matter. This is one of the reasons when I came out of the service, I wanted to be a freelance illustrator because I could stay on the subject of black people. Well, I was trying to find out something about the life that I was living every day that wasn't connected with art school. I mean, in art school, what we learned was art was one thing and life was another thing, or at least it seemed to be that way. Anyway, the life that we talked about in art school had nothing to do with Bed-Stuy, because that was considered a sub-life, a different culture, a culture that did not reflect the best of American values. But to me, it seemed that the life that I was living outside of art school had a lot of vitality, spirit, and passion. And it's very strange because I started by drawing children, which in this society says is not very important, that you're sentimental when you draw children. But children in the eyes of black people are a reflection of the hopes that they have. Not a hope to just do better, but to a people who have been oppressed and really caught a lot of hell, the hopes is that they will be able to just be free. The thing that began to depress me was that after a certain age, the children would start taking on the attitude of the adults. They would begin to think that they were black and ugly. I remember once in art history class, the art teacher was talking about Western art and the whole tradition of Western art and what that meant. And he didn't mention anything about black people. But finally, I stood up and asked the question, weren't there any black artists of any significance? And he said, no, not that he heard of. And I said, what about African art? And he said, well, that's considered primitive. All right. And I walked out of the class because I had to walk out of a class that did not include me, a history that did not include me. The people in the bars came there to relax after working those tired, dull jobs. They reflected, in a lot of cases, a straight spiritual impression. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't covered up. They were there to have a good time, no matter how bad or how dull that job was. On that particular weekend, they would reflect what they really felt. Or what they really hoped to feel in the society that oppressed them. The tissue paper is kind of a natural thing for me because I find it very hard working with oil paints. I tend to make a design and then paint until I paint it completely out. But the tissue paper is like a veneer that I can lay over my line drawing of wetness. I lay the paper down as smooth as I can and then paint it out. And sometimes accidents happen and I pick up like ruffles, but I even use those. I guess you can call it like accidents in life. The important thing is that the ink and the temper paint run together and it becomes exciting to me. It fights me and I fight to work with it and use the accidents or work against the accidents. Is in the sense where the fun really starts for me because I'm working now mainly with mood. I've already laid in the broad shapes and now I'm concerned about the overall mood, what the picture is saying to me and what the picture might be saying to somebody else who views it. If after the painting, it doesn't seem to have the right mood with the line drawing I had before that I traced, I can rub it down and start all over again. So it gives me the confidence, knowing that I have that base, that line drawing, that I can start with again. It gives me the confidence to take chances, to risk maybe even messing it up, to try new things. That's why the technique is good for me. No, the environment in Africa, essentially the environment in Africa said to me was that what I felt about black people in the States, what I felt deep inside was a love for them. But you don't say those kinds of things in Bed-Stuy because it might be considered naive. So what I would do was put it into work. When I got to Africa, I began to see where that feeling I had about love for black people, it was natural for me to say that I did love them, or I didn't have to say it, so it was natural. It had a lot to do with me being in the majority, but it had a lot to do with people accept the fact that they're beautiful or ugly in a natural way. My colors and forms changed because I was in the tropics. I was in an atmosphere where color was very important, where dark skin against light colors was important in graphic terms, where the sun seemed to dominate. The sun seemed to be every place, and it filled you up, where there was a dance consciousness involved in everything. So my drawings became free-flowing. More lines, more rhythmic lines began to appear in the drawings, especially when I came back to the States and started doing books. I wasn't aware that this came from Africa at the time, but really, in a sense, what happened was that I got caught up with the joy of knowing that what I felt about black people was real and not just imagined in my own head. But I began to see while I was living in Guyana that I had been, over these many years, building, working on my skills and talent to say something to a large group of black people